told you they had lived for over 100 years, what would you ask them? Would you ask how to make money? How to avoid mistakes? How to stay young forever? Or would you ask the real question, was it worth it? Today we're stepping into a perspective most of us never get to hear. The perspective that only comes after decades of living, loving, losing, failing and surviving. Not from a motivational speaker, not from a billionaire, but from the kind of wisdom that only appears when time has stripped everything unnecessary away. This is not about secrets, it's not about hacks. It's about what remains after 100 years and what truly matters when there's nothing left to prove. Stay with me. When people reach extreme old age, something interesting happens. They stop pretending, they stop chasing approval, they stop polishing their story, and they stop lying to themselves. What they offer instead is clarity, not optimism, not bitterness, clarity. In stories from people who've lived a century or more, the same themes appear again and again, even across cultures, countries, and backgrounds. They don't talk about achievements the way we expect. They don't romanticize success. They don't glorify hustle. Instead, they talk about time, regret, relationships, and the quiet choices that slowly shaped their lives. This video is divided into two major sections. Section 1, what happiness actually is and why most people misunderstand it. Section 2, how to live differently once you understand that truth. Nothing here is rushed. Nothing here is exaggerated. This is long-form reflection and the kind meant to sit with you. What happiness really is. Happiness is not a constant state. One of the biggest lies we're told is that happiness is something you can maintain, as if it's a destination, a permanent upgrade, a mood you unlock and never lose. But people who live long lives know something most of us don't. Happiness comes and goes, just like everything else. They experience joy, they experience grief, often in the same year, sometimes in the same week, sometimes in the same day. They watched children be born and friends be buried. They celebrated milestones while quietly mourning losses no one else noticed. Life never gave them one emotion at a time. And the happiest people weren't the ones who avoided pain. They were the ones who stopped arguing with reality. They understood something subtle but powerful. Sadness isn't failure. Struggle isn't weakness. Disappointment isn't proof you chose wrong. It's proof you're alive. Trying to eliminate pain doesn't create happiness. It creates fear. Fear of loss, fear of change, fear of anything that might disrupt the fragile balance you're trying to protect. And fear makes happiness impossible. Most suffering comes from resistance. Looking back over long lives, one pattern becomes clear. People suffer most when they resist what cannot be changed: aging, loss, other people's choices, time itself. They spent years fighting the facts of their own lives, arguing with the past, wishing they were younger, healthier, earlier, different. The happiest elders weren't passive. They didn't give up. They didn't stop caring. They were flexible. They learned the difference between persistence and stubbornness. Happiness is quiet, not loud. Modern culture teaches us that happiness is loud. Big wins, big moments, photos that prove you're doing well. But people who lived for nearly a century describe happiness very differently. Happiness was sitting next to someone they loved without needing to talk. It was waking up without pain. They didn't chase intensity, they protected peace. They learned that constant excitement exhausts the nervous system. Those quiet days compound into meaningful lives. Regret doesn't come from failure, it comes from delay. When asked what they regretted most, very few said, "I tried and failed." They said, "I waited too long." Toward the end of long lives, happiness was described as a relationship with time, a willingness to be present, an understanding that no moment needs to be perfect to be meaningful. They didn't ask, "Am I happy all the time?" They asked, "Am I honest with myself? Am I at peace with how I'm spending today?" And that was enough. Time is not fast. You are distracted. People say life moves fast. But those who lived long lives disagree. Time didn't speed up. Attention disappeared. Years felt short, only when days were lived on autopilot. When mornings blurred into nights. When weeks passed without memory attached to them. The moments people remembered most clearly weren't efficient, they weren't productive, they weren't optimized, they were present. A conversation that went longer than planned, a walk taken slowly instead of rushed, a meal eaten without a screen nearby, a moment fully inhabited. Presence stretches time, distraction compresses it. The elders didn't remember busy years clearly, they remembered intentional ones. They warned about living always elsewhere, thinking about what's next, what's missing, what's overdue. Because when attention leaves the moment, life keeps moving without you. And one day, you look back and realize you were busy surviving your life instead of living it. Relationships outlive everything else. Careers ended, money was spent, awards collected dust, but relationships stayed or haunted.
Long-lived people measured success differently, not by what they achieved, but by who stood next to them when achievement stopped mattering.
Who showed up, who stayed, who listened when nothing could be fixed, and who they lost, not because of distance, but because of pride, silence, or delay. They spoke about loneliness often, but not the kind caused by being alone. Loneliness came from emotional disconnection, from being surrounded by people yet never fully known. They regretted arguments that lasted too long, apologies delayed until timing ruined them, moments when ego mattered more than repair. They wished they'd chosen people over being right more often, connection over control, understanding over winning. Because in the end, no one missed being impressive. They missed being close. Your body is not separate from your life. Health isn't something you handle later. Later arrives faster than expected. People who lived past 100 didn't all have perfect genetics. They didn't all avoid illness. They didn't all age easily. But they respected their bodies earlier than others. They listened sooner. They rested without guilt. They didn't treat exhaustion like a badge of honor. They walked, not to optimize performance, but to stay mobile. They slept, not as a luxury, but as maintenance. They understood something many learn too late. Your body is not a vehicle you discard. It's the environment you live inside. Every neglected ache becomes louder with time. Every ignored signal eventually demands attention. Your body carries you into old age or abandons you early. And no success compensates for a body that can no longer participate in life. Meaning comes from contribution. The longest-lived people rarely describe themselves as successful. They describe themselves as useful. They helped, they taught, they listened, not in grand ways, in small, consistent ones. They showed up when they were needed, they passed knowledge quietly, they made themselves available. Purpose didn't come from titles, it came from impact, even quiet impact. They noticed something strange. When people felt needed, they stayed alive longer. Not biologically, emotionally. Having a reason to get up. Someone to show up for. Something to give, even when energy was limited. Motivation fades. Recognition ends. But contribution sustains. Because being useful reminds you that you still belong. What long lives quietly taught. Across decades, one truth repeated itself. Life didn't reward intensity. It rewarded consistency. Not dramatic transformations, but small adjustments made early. They wished they'd slowed down sooner, listened longer, let go earlier. They learned that most suffering wasn't caused by hardship. It was caused by resistance, resisting aging, resisting change, resisting reality. Acceptance didn't mean giving up. It meant stopping the internal war, and peace followed. The unexpected advantage, here's what those who lived long lives would want you to know. You don't need to wait decades to understand this. You don't need to earn wisdom through regret alone. You don't need to lose everything to value something. You're earlier than you think. That means habits are still flexible, relationships are still repairable, time is still negotiable. Most people don't realize they were early till they're late. You still have room to choose differently. A quiet question to end with. Not a challenge, not a command. Just a question worth sitting with. If you look back from old age, what would you wish you'd protected sooner? Your attention, your health, your relationships, your honesty? Whatever the answer is, start there. Not dramatically, not perfectly, just deliberately, because life doesn't move fast. We drift through it when we stop paying attention.
And attention, given early on, changes everything.
105-year life doesn't reveal secrets, it reveals simplicity. After a century of living, nothing felt hidden anymore. Nothing felt mysterious in the way people imagine. There was no final formula, no special shortcut, no moment where everything suddenly made sense all at once. What remained was what had always been there. Happiness wasn't found in perfection, because perfection never arrived. It wasn't found in control, because control was always temporary. It wasn't found in constant positivity, because life never agreed to that bargain. Happiness was quieter than all of that. It was found in acceptance.
Not resignation, acceptance. The ability to stop fighting what already is, accepting the body you wake up in.
The past you can't edit, the people who changed or didn't, the time that moved forward whether you were ready or not.
Peace didn't come from fixing everything. It came from knowing what didn't need fixing.
Happiness was found in connection, not crowds, not attention, not being known by many, but being known by a few. One person who really listened, one relationship that didn't require performance, one place where you didn't have to explain yourself. In the end, people didn't miss being admired. They missed being understood. They didn't miss applause. They missed presence. Happiness was found in presence, not living ahead of yourself, not constantly rehearsing tomorrow, not reliving yesterday like it still had leverage, just being where your feet were, eating without rushing,
listening without waiting to speak, noticing when something was good while it was still happening.
Presence didn't make life perfect, it made it real. And real was enough.
And happiness was found in the courage to live honestly. That took the longest.
It took decades for many people to stop living according to expectations that weren't theirs, to stop shrinking opinions to keep peace, to stop postponing truth in exchange for comfort. They realized too late that honesty isn't what ruins lives. Avoidance does. The weight they carried wasn't from hard truths spoken. It was from truths swallowed. Looking back, the regrets weren't dramatic. They weren't about missed fame, or missed money, or missed recognition. They were quieter.
I should have said it sooner. I should have left earlier. I should have taken my health seriously before my body forced the lesson. I should have lived like time mattered. Because time always mattered. They just didn't know how expensive delay was until the bill arrived.
And here's the part most people don't expect. You don't need to wait decades to understand this. You don't need to earn wisdom through suffering alone. You don't need to lose everything to value something. You don't need to reach old age to live intentionally. You're early, earlier than you think. That means mistakes are still reversible. Conversations are still possible. Habits are still negotiable. Time is still flexible. That might be the greatest advantage you'll ever have. If this reflection resonated with you, it's not because it was profound. It's because something in you already knows it's true. And maybe you haven't ignored it. You've just been busy preparing, busy waiting, busy assuming there would be more time. There usually is until there isn't. So tonight, before the day ends, ask yourself one simple question. If I look back from old age, what would I wish I'd started sooner? Not tomorrow, not next year. Sooner. Then take the smallest honest step toward it. Not because life is short, but because it's happening now. If you want more long-form reflection shaped by time, perspective, and lived experience, subscribe. And remember, you're not late, you're early. Use that gift.